106.3 to St. Ronnie Love on a station where you never know what you hit next. While we playing your favorite hip hop and R&B slow jams. Today's show is a great one. I have a very special guest joining me right now, a writer for the New York Daily News and also civil rights activist Shaun King. Welcome to the show. Thank you for coming.
Hey man, glad to be here.
Anytime. Oh, so now you're here at Siena and you're doing a keynote speak. So for the listeners out there, what are some of the things that you're going to be focusing on as you speak to some of the students here at Siena?
Well, I heard that there was a controversial commentary here on campus this past week, kind of challenging the notion of white privilege and whether or not it's real, and whether or not there's even such a thing as discrimination or racism anymore. So I did not know that just until a few minutes ago. But my presentation is very much about, kind of a rebuttal to that piece about how we're in a deeply problematic time where not just discrimination, but injustice and just deep injustice, not just from police brutality and mass incarceration, but to issues of pay equity and access to higher education. I mean, that injustice is so deep in America that I think my presentation, I'll show that it's comparable to some of the worst times in American history. And so, some of what I hope to talk about, though, is that for people who don't experience that, it can be easy for them to look around and assume it doesn't exist. And I hope to press my case with kind of facts and evidence to show that we live in just a deeply problematic time. And what's ugly is that for people who don't experience it, they very genuinely, seriously can believe that we're making it up. Mm-hmm. Because where they get their news, they don't talk about it. Their preferred political leaders or heroes don't talk about it. And so many of us, including you and I, live in our own bubbles that people who live in a completely different bubble can assume that what we say about our reality is fiction. And some of it is even how social media works. Mm-hmm. And how, we follow the people that we love and like, and we live in a real sense of isolation from one another, causing people to think kind of wild stuff about one another. So I'm trying to get to the root of that today.
Okay, because we just I had David Brown here, who's the president and CEO of the YMCA, and I was telling him a story about Mike Brown. I know that you did some work or did some fundraising for Mike Brown.
And for his family. I've done some events with them. Yeah, good people.
And he came and he spoke out, and we had a student in the stands who raised his hand. And he said, "I'm very sorry for your loss," but he basically made a statement telling Mr. Mike Brown that it was probable cause for the police to kill his son. So he basically told him that out of all the research that I did, right, he feels that the police had probable cause to kill his son. So how do you feel about that?
Well, it's infuriating, one, because I know Mike Brown Sr. and I know Mike Brown Jr.'s family, and people who know the actual facts of that case know how problematic it was. For instance, Darren Wilson testified in a civil suit just recently, and his testimony just went public. And in his testimony, he admitted under oath that several of the things that he had said in previous police reports were not true. He admitted under oath that Mike Brown never grabbed his gun, where he had said that previously. He said that wasn't true. He admitted that he didn't know that Mike Brown or his friends had been involved in anything.
Now, I'm sorry to cut you off. Now, when he was admitting this, was this during the court case, while the case was going on, or was this after?
This was a civil suit just this past December, and there's a new documentary out as well that talks about some facts of the case. But I'll tweet and Facebook the link to the civil suit.
Okay.
Because when I saw it, even for those of us who had followed the case so closely, it was the first time that Darren Wilson had to testify in open court. The case never went to court. Mm-hmm. And when he was challenged on some of the basic facts of the case, he admitted that several of the basic facts that the media ran with were not true. And for instance, he admitted that on Canfield Drive, which is where Mike Brown was killed, that he deliberately drove his car in a way and cut them off in a way that was very confrontational. He admitted that, even though he admitted under oath that at that time the only thing he knew they had done was jaywalked, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's deeply problematic.
Yeah.
I wrote a story almost 2 years ago, soon after Mike Brown was killed, how Darren Wilson chased Mike Brown for over 150 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Like, initially, St. Louis police said Mike Brown was killed right by the police car. And then they would never admit that that was a complete fabrication. 150 feet. And we're talking about half a football field. I mean, we're talking about he chased Mike Brown for half a football field. So Mike was not the aggressor.
Yeah.
And he admitted under oath in this December civil suit, he had already shot Mike, and Mike was running for his life. And that's not to say that it's not a complex scenario, but for a student or anybody else to get up who has not who Googled it
Mm-hmm.
and read a few reports versus someone like Mike Brown Sr. who's lived and breathed this case
Yeah.
for years. Here's the thing. Even if I thought what that young man thought, I'd probably kept that to myself.
Exactly. So that's a lot what everybody was saying in SSU. We about to give you a speech because when he did it, it was just like this might have been the first time I ever seen white students look at another white student like, "What are you doing?" And
Because
they understand the sensitive of it. His family was there. His little daughter wasn't there, so the sister was there and the brother was there, and I think the mother was there too, right? And the little daughter wasn't there. And after he gave his speech on his response to what the student said, he mentioned that if his daughter was here, his response and his reaction would have been different because the little daughter has she had a very tight bond with
they were
Mike Brown.
close,
Yeah,
man.
you know.
See, and here's the root point. To people who don't feel an emotional connection, not just to Mike Brown, but to any victims of police brutality or discrimination, they see these stories as news stories. That's that man's son.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a trending topic for him. This is not a Google search. Mike Brown Jr. was the best man at his wedding 2 weeks before he was killed. They were close. I mean, he had just graduated high school. He didn't graduate on time, and so they forced him to go to summer school, which he hated. He literally was at the front of the line. He was like the leader of that summer school squad there. And, so when somebody gets up without a sense of tact or sensitivity,
Mm-hmm.
it exposes something deeper, which is that for them, this is a story. But for Mike Brown Sr. and even for me, for you, it's much deeper than that. And what they don't understand is that when you see this, you see yourself. When you see an issue of police brutality, this is not some faraway policy issue, but something that you are fully aware of that could affect you and your loved ones. It's personal. But what's revealed in someone getting up and saying, "Hey, there was probable cause there," is that for him there's not that same emotional connection that we have.
Mm-hmm. Right. So to switch gears a little bit.
Yeah.
Now you founded a website called ahomeinhaiti.org.
Yeah.
And now you used eBay and Twitter. eBay and Twitter helped raise money over $1.5 million for Haiti and for the earthquakes. So how did you get into that, and what made you want to do that?
Well, it's wild. It's wild how that unfolded. And I was planning a trip to Haiti before the earthquake happened. And I had started, this was in the early days of Twitter. Like literally, Twitter had only been around for a few years. There was probably only 2 or 3 million people on Twitter at the time. And I mean, now there's almost 500 million people there. And but I followed a couple guys in Haiti on Twitter. And when the earthquake happened, I saw men that I respected and admired tweeting about the loss of their loved ones, about the destruction of their homes. And for the first time in my life, a natural disaster unfolded in a way where I wasn't just watching it on the news, I was watching people that I had been following say what they were experiencing. And my first response was, "Oh my God, like, how can we help?" And so before we ever did any big fundraisers, we did small stuff, like we sent computers, GPS devices, like emergency aid. We sent millions of dollars at first of tents of so that because we knew it was going to be years before anybody could build long-term solutions, and literally as a million people lost their homes, people were literally just sleeping in the rain or not sleeping at all, and so we provided emergency aid, just like emergency fundraisers, and then we did a huge celebrity auction about 6 months after the earthquake.
Yeah, I was ready to ask were there any like celebrities who also helped out or.
Yeah, oh man, hundreds. Like so we had almost 300 different celebrities who participated in that auction, from athletes and entertainers to reality TV stars and the like. And so, but what it taught me was, because I'm shocked at how much time has passed since it happened. It just showed me what can be done online. Like when you pull people together, when people are frustrated or outraged or hurt, if you come with the right cause, people will show up and support it.
Absolutely. So you also did you was a motivational speaker for the Atlanta juvenile justice system.
Yeah, for years.
For years. So was that something that you wanted to like give back to the kids and try to give your message to the kids to like this is not the path that you want to live and
well, when I graduated Morehouse College in 2001. My first job was as a high school history and civics teacher, and I did that for my first year out of college, and then I saw this charity that had just received a grant working in prisons and youth detention centers. So I applied for it, got the job, and my job was an incredibly tough job, man. Probably the hardest job I've ever had. My job was to go in and help primarily young men who had been sentenced as adults, but these were teenagers who had been sentenced as adults for serious felonies. And most of these young brothers, these were not kids who were framed. Like they were kids who had made terrible mistakes, but were about to spend 10, 20, 30 years of their life in prison. My job was to go in and help them understand that they could still prepare for a life that mattered, even though they were about to spend 10, 20, or 30 years of their life in prison.
Some of them think that it's over,
I understand.
Yeah, so and, like being able to, and I commend you on that, being able to, still give them the courage and still the hope that there's something.
My job was to show them a completely different way of looking at life, and that as difficult as it looked and as it was going to be the hardest 10, 20, or 30 years of that they could ever experience. There were still ways that they could find value and meaning and purpose, and a hard lesson to try to convince somebody. So with each group of students, I would have 4 to 6 weeks, because when you're a teenager and you're convicted and you're still in the juvenile justice system, they still have school every day. They're just incarcerated. And my job was to spend 4 to 6 weeks with them before they would be sent off to adult prison. Sometimes these kids were 13, 14 years old, about to go to adult prison. My job was to prepare them for what that was going to be like.
Oh, okay.
And hard, man. I loved it and hated it. I love that I was able to spend time with these young brothers, but at the same time, I hated that there were not just hundreds, but thousands and thousands of guys coming through that system.
Wow.
And it shaped me in a lot of ways. It shaped how I viewed the justice system in America.
Did you watch the 13th documentary that was?
I did. I'm in it. I'm in it. I got a little small interview in the 4th part. But 13th was a powerful documentary, man. Yeah.
It was. It really opened my eyes to the system and what's really going on in there. And it was. And I also am glad they put out a movie for the guy who killed himself after he got out.
Khalif Browder.
Who was convicted of a crime that he didn't commit.
Yeah.
So
no, he didn't, man. He was a sweet brother, man. A wonderful kid with a beautiful heart, and they sent him to Rikers Island, and he was never convicted. And he never even went to court. And for 3.5 years, he was in Rikers Island, which is again an adult penitentiary, just awaiting his court date. And then they just dropped all charges. He never did it. And so for 3.5 years, he was beaten, often. He attempted suicide multiple times while he was there. And when he got out, wonderful people embraced him. Jay-Z, Rosie O'Donnell, others met him when he got out. He could not overcome the pain of what happened to him and took his own life. And his mother just died recently, and she was devastated by what happened to him as well. And it's just a terrible example of how the system chews people up and spits them out.
Yeah, exactly. Now, before we end the show and you get out there and give your speech, if you were speaking to yourself 20 years ago, what would you tell yourself about the journey that you're about to go on and
oh man, face? One, I had no idea where I would be right now. Like I didn't, I had my own plans and dreams and thoughts, but some of it, would just be, I went through a period where I really, really cared what people thought about me, and I just didn't know how to shake it. And that's a natural feeling to care, and I think it's a normal human emotion. But the more known I became, I had to shake that off, and I wish I had learned that lesson well before I became as known as I am today. Like, I'm at a point now where I care about what people who love me think about me. I care about what my wife, my friends, my family, or even people I respect. Like, I would care what you thought about me. I respect you. But we can't live our lives where people who hate us somehow inform what we think about ourselves. And so I'm at a point now where I care about what a small circle of people, I care what they think. But I'm at a point now where I've evolved enough, matured enough, to where I don't care much at all about what most people think. This took me a while to get there. I just didn't see it. I didn't know that was a thing that I would need to learn 20 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Shaun King, for stopping by.
Always, man.
Really appreciate it. That right there is it. Ronnie Love Show.